This morning our message title is The Bigger Picture. And we're going to begin by talking about the creative process of life. It's actually a pretty good day to be here if you are new with us today. And at the same time, because we're going to be talking about ultimately I would say, the main idea of what we believe in science of mind in a nutshell, which it can't be contained in a nutshell. It's a lifetime experience because it is a way of life. It is a way of living, a way of thinking that most of us probably weren't blessed enough to experience as children. And so we're talking, when we say the creative process, we're talking about the symbol that we have in the stained glass on the wall. And when we look at that, we use it as a teaching tool. And I want to use it also to address some terminology. Lately I've found myself saying at times that we use so many different words that mean the same thing. And we do that in an attempt to find what really works for us personally, each one of us. So if we each wrote on a piece of paper what the science of mind is all about, we would have, as many people as are here, that many ideas. And that, I think, is a good thing. For me, it's how we're going to end wars. Because when we can come together and agree to disagree in peace, in our relationships, in groups, then we are activating the creative process personally and race consciously. So we're going to look at some of the terminology. So when we look at the symbol, I first want to point out that the circle, brown circle around the white and the blues, that circle represents infinity or eternality. So it does not represent a limitedness because life is eternal and infinite. So I was thinking this week that probably it would have been better if it had been a zillion or whatever word's bigger than that, an infinite number of arrows pointing out, because all that is God, universal energy, whatever you choose to call it, is all that is. So with that in mind, our symbol was devised by our founder, Ernest Holmes, and he devised it to use as a diagram that what he meant when he would say the descent of spirit into form. And we're going to talk about that. And so the descent of spirit into form is a universal concept. The idea also could be used, and it is used, personally as a creative process within each one of us. And we're going to talk about both of those ideas. So if you find that you're interested in this and you're searching for words that really resonate with you so you can make changes within your own life, then I invite you to look in the back of the Science of Mind textbook, because there are a lot of symbols there and you have a wide range of words with which you can use. Some will resonate, some won't, but they're fascinating discussions. So we use the symbol in classes to explain the basic principles of how the universe is united and how spirit, soul, and body relate and interact with one another. So lately I've also noticed that I've given a lot of invitations in the message, and I'm going to give one more yet today. And that is an invitation to use your imagination today, to really open up to your own creative energies and allow yourself to think outside the box. Just because you think outside the box and you have a thought that at first you're like, I don't believe that. Maybe you do. But you've been conditioned to not for some reason. So just be open, because just because you have a fleeting thought, or you wonder and give contemplation to an idea, does not necessarily mean that that's what you believe. It's what you're playing with to shift and look at where you want changes in your life and what thoughts are going to correlate with those changes. So let's start opening our imagination to the understanding that very often traditionally, this is God, soul, and body, or sometimes called the Father, Son, and Holy Ghost. Call it whatever you want that works for you. It also, in Science of Mind, is called spirit, soul, and body, soul being the law aspect, and body being effects, demonstrations. This is the realm where conditions occur. You and I are in form, so we are here. However, we are also here and here. I'm going to explain more. So let's think in the universal first, not us personally in the creative process, but in the universal. I'm going to invite you to really stretch yourself, because I'm going to invite you to imagine that there are no people on earth. You are a soul body, which is your eternal self, and you are in the ethers of all that is. And there are no people. Spirit, or God, and law are still operating. Spirit and law, although they're shown because it's a descent of life, are shown as separate, but they aren't separate. The divine masculine and the divine feminine are a union that cooperate and work together well to create. Spirit, being the love aspect, the wisdom, penetrates into the law and becomes the form. The law, we're familiar with physical laws. I often use the law of gravity because we're all real familiar with that one. But our thought that we have also creates a law for ourselves, and we impress it into the soul, the law, and it becomes form. And so, as the more you think for the universal, if there are no people, then this is still working. We're no longer here, but this is still functioning. God is, the universal energy of life is still operating at this level. Anything you want to add to that part?
No, not really.
Okie dokie. So,
Except the idea that matter and energy are never created or destroyed, they just transform into something else.
yeah. And that is the part, the top of the what appears to be a V, the descent. When it forms, then it goes back up and out. So anything that becomes form, ashes to ashes, dust to dust, the Bible tells us, and it comes back up and goes back into source to be transformed. So as we look at this one, this chart, we're looking at God as conscious, cause, source. And that consciousness, because consciousness in quantum physics, they say the ground of all being is consciousness. And consciousness, the thought, comes down into the subconscious, and this is the area where our subconscious belief systems play out in our life. So Wayne was reading about how sometimes something happens and we think we want something, but then we didn't really want that. The opposite happens too. Sometimes we say we want something, but then we think we can't get it, and we don't. And that's why, because we knew we couldn't. And that's a hidden belief system within us. And it plays out in form. So, let me turn that one off one way or another. Oh, it was gone too long. So, when we look at that soul part, the middle part, and we call it the law, some things about the law. The law always obeys without question. It is not personal to anyone. It does not push back against whatever we are speaking into it or thinking into it. And our thought acts as a force, the law of force, or thought. And what we know is a force in motion continues in motion until another force acts upon it. So we can place a dominant thought into law, such as, I am a joyous expression of life, and manifest that. We hold it in our mind, and we hold it in our mind until we know, oh my gosh, I really am filled with joy right now. And then it's manifest. We do it until it manifests, whatever kind of prayer or treatment we're giving. The thing is that since the law always says yes, we can change our mind. Mind meaning that middle part, that law part. And by change our mind, I mean that when or if we negate that thought, that affirmation that we have, then we are changing what we're placing into the law. And I notice that we do that a lot as people. If you're talking with someone and you say, well, what do you really want? And you say, well, I really want blah, blah, blah. There's often, not always, but there's often a but I can't have it, or I don't really deserve it. And that oftentimes is in that hidden belief area. And yes, you can. Yes, you can have whatever you want. Do you really want? And when I say want, I mean placing your thought into the idea that is God, that is the qualities of God. So when we have an affirmation, if we have turmoil and we want to feel peaceful, then we're going to share that affirmation, say that affirmation, know that affirmation until we feel peace. And once we realize that we've created it, we can sustain it by staying there and not saying, oh my gosh, even though this horrible thing is happening and look, really, blah, blah, blah. I'm back into that negating of my original thought that I wanted and that I know that I want and desire in my life and to experience in my life. Now David is going to take us a little deeper into the idea of perspectives that we might hold. So you might want to open up and just see which words jump out at you, either because you're like, oops, that's me, or because you're thinking to yourself, nope, definitely not me, I'm not that one, because what we resist persists, and probably there's something to think about there.
Well, Deborah talked about the two aspects of the creative system, and it having to do with the personal and the universal. And I think we quite often deal with the personal more because we know that that saying, change your thinking, change your life. And if I want to make changes in my life, this is how I use it, how I make it happen. And so we see ourselves in this physical form, but really we are, since we are personalizations of the one life, we are within the universal part two, also, not part two, but also. And so therefore we need to look at that opportunity to realize, the idea of the bigger picture, ooh, I am more than this physical entity and personality that I claim as David or whoever you are. There is more to me than that. I am part of the universal aspect of this creative process. We know that we're part of a larger life, and there is a universal life force flowing through each one of us and all of us collectively, that we are interconnected with all of life. And it may be an inner knowing most of the time, but feelings of things like family and community and relationship and social bonds, whatever to what degree they are undeniable. We know there's something that connects us to one another. We feel it. We relate to it. We feel that we have some affinity or compassion or congeniality or love. There's something that's connecting all of us. We also, because we're a physical form and live in this realm of limitation and substance, we experience separations. And if we use other words, if I would happen to bring up words like genocide, or Ukraine, or Gaza, or refugees, or things like that, those may rouse an uneasy feeling within us, even though we probably have never known anybody or know anybody currently who are living through that or living in those places. We probably haven't even been there. But we do have some feeling of connection to lives that are having challenges. We are one with all of our fellow humanity as we live our individual lives in our individual slices of the cosmic pie. We are individual pieces of the one life. But for some reason we also feel connection to all those others, even though we haven't even met them. We feel some bond. Imagine how it would feel if we couldn't imagine what others saw and thought. We couldn't imagine how other people thought. Imagine if all we experienced was exclusive to our personal physical sensory receptors, our five senses, and we had no intuitive feelings of how others saw us or thought of us, if the observation and opinion of others had absolutely no effect upon us whatsoever, and if there were no social interaction with other life. We could see and feel them if we bumped into each other because we are physical beings, but there were no impressions of personal space or social distance or emotional interactions. Literally, we would be like ships passing in the night or billiard balls bouncing against each other in random physical reactions. Imagine a sense of isolation, separation, loneliness, segregation that would emerge. And we would probably have a longing to be connected with others. And that return to our connected state is actually returning to our true nature of who and what we really are. Our oneness is all that we really are. So, in all of that, all those ideas, what is your literal frame of mind? What shapes how you see your experience in the world? You should challenge yourself to see outside the box, outside that framework that you set up. Our parameters may be there for perceived self-preservation. We must determine why those protective parameters are there. Could it be fear, for example? If it is fear, how you see the world is shaped by the lens of fear. So did you create the fears and parameters, or were they imposed by outside influences? Your frame of mind is based on emotions, past experiences, and influences. And those things determine beliefs. And this is important. Beliefs determine the extent of our perspective. How much of the limitless realm of possibility are you actually allowing in to be able to experience? You could be looking into a microscope at the itty-bitty little pieces and not seeing the bigger picture. Or you could be looking into a telescope, grasping at those things which are out of reach and neglecting your personal aspects. Or you could be looking in a periscope, feeling overwhelmed, underwater, depressed. You basically just zeroing in on a single point of view, a narrow point of reference. Now, religion and politics build security walls and impenetrable frames of view about what is right and wrong and good and bad, and what is good and bad for me. But in the end, we choose our own filters. No matter what we hear from around us or through us, we choose our own beliefs. Whatever frame of filter or rose-colored glasses or denials we choose does not negate reality. Reality is our connection to all of life. Ernest Holmes says we should be careful not to divide our mental house against itself. I think it's an amazing phrase. We should be careful not to divide our mental house against itself. Basically, he's saying that our mental house is where we live and have our being, and all parts of our existence should be in agreement, including within ourselves. The mental house in which we live, the physical house in which we live, should all be in agreement to recognize we are all one entity. The one life, whether it is viewed personally or universally, should be seen and experienced as unified, cohesive, and whole.
We're going to let Ernest Holmes give the summary for today. In 1958, near the end of his life, he ended a talk saying, "If I pass on tonight, they can take everything I have ever written and toss it in the ashes. It's going to be thrown there someday anyway. But two things will remain. There is a presence and there is a power in the universe, which constitute a dual unity of action and reaction, and the polarity from which all things come. Learn to court the presence by not only seeing good in everything and everybody, but by feeling good all the time. Feel the presence in the sacred place of your consciousness." And so it is.